Hello basketball fans, welcome back to our channel. If you haven't noticed, in today's game, the three-pointer is kind of a big deal. If you ask coaches why, they will say it's more efficient than the mid-range jumper, and because of this, most coaches will tell their players that the mid-range jump shot is pointless to practice. They are correct in saying that the mid-range shot is less efficient than a three-pointer. I'm not here to argue against that, but what I am here to argue in this video is that practicing your mid-range jump shot and floater are just as important as practicing your three-pointer. The mid-range jump shot has a place in today's game. Let me explain. In the last 20 years, the frequency of pick and roll plays has steadily increased. According to NBA tracking data, teams ran pick and roll plays roughly 10% of the time in the early 2000s. However, by the late 2010s, that number skyrocketed to around 30% of all possessions. This rise can be attributed to the offensive advantages it offers. Simultaneously, three-point shooting has experienced an insane rise in popularity. In the early 2000s, teams attempted an average of only 15 three-pointers per game. Fast forward to recent years, that number has more than doubled, with teams now attempting over 35 three-pointers per game on average. The analytics revolution in basketball has played a significant role in the increase of three-point attempts. Statistical analysis has shown that shooting threes at a high percentage is more efficient than mid-range jump shots. Three-point jumpers average 1.15 points per possession, while mid-range shots average 0.85. This realization has led teams to prioritize shooting beyond the arc, as the expected value of a three-pointer is higher than a mid-range jumper. However, and this is where it gets interesting, in response to the rise of the pick and roll and three-point shooting, NBA teams have changed their defense, especially implementing a defensive strategy known as drop coverage. So what is drop coverage? Drop coverage is a defensive scheme used to guard against the pick and roll. In this strategy, the defender guarding the screener drops back toward the paint, while the on-ball defender goes over the screen, attempting to cut off the ball handler's drive to the basket, while other defenders stick to the shooters on the perimeter. Drop coverage has become increasingly prevalent, with over 40% of pick and roll plays defended this way in recent seasons. This defensive approach aims to limit easy drives to the basket and limit threes, forcing the offense to settle, forget this, mid-range jump shots. Some of the best defensive teams in the NBA have used drop coverage, including the Milwaukee Bucks. The Bucks have Brook Lopez. He's a little slow on his feet, so they tend to not want to switch screens. Instead, they drop and it works. And that's where the mid-range jump shot comes into play. While the analytics era has devalued mid-range shots, the evolution of defensive strategies like drop coverage has created new opportunities for mid-range jumpers and floaters. When defenders drop back to protect the paint, it leaves a gap between them and the offensive player, allowing for open mid-range shots. Teams that play drop coverage give up the open mid-range shot on purpose. So if you practice this shot, if you master this shot, you will have an opportunity to shoot this shot on almost every single possession where there's a pick and roll. And if you don't believe me, well, maybe you'll believe Chris Paul.
I say that early because once I figured out that pick and roll, that ball screen, right? Like that's most of the game. I noticed as I started getting a little older or whatnot, I started to get a mid-range, right?
I want to ask you about bigs and drop coverage. To the point now where so now we see a lot of drop coverage where the low man has responsibility, but he's not necessarily committing all the way into the paint. So we asked Dame about drop coverage, and he's a fan of it, because obviously he can just shoot his little pull-up three. What's going through your mind when you see that big all the way back, like Milwaukee does, like the Jazz do with Rudy Gobert?
First and foremost, you got to remember I'm a player too. I'm not a coach, so I don't want to say nothing. I'm on a new team. Don't have me.
You always try to get an edge, man. Just answer the question, bro.
No, I don't want to say nothing crazy. Then we play in a game and they go back and be like, well, Chris said, you know what I mean? So do you remember when we started doing drop coverage in LA?
Yes, I do.
You remember?
Yes.
Me and DJ still talk about this all the time.
Not a fan of it.
Me and DJ was pissed. I'll never forget it because me and DeAndre were number one in ball screen defense, right? Like we were number one in ball screen defense because I would get into the ball or whatnot, and DJ was quick enough to be up at the point of the screen. And so then we could steal the ball, right? If you try to throw it low, we steal it high or whatnot. And I'll never forget that first practice when we put that defense in. We was on the far end of the court. And big fella was like, "See, what we doing?" But it was, it's a copycat league. It's a copycat league. And so, I know statistics, the stats and all that says go to a drop coverage. You know me, Bubs, I always think everything depends on who you're playing against. I don't think anything is cut and dry. Like, you got to do it this time. When I see a guy in a drop coverage, it's like, okay, cool.
I was thinking about just now, Game 6 of the Western Conference semifinals. We're up, 19 against the Rockets. Josh Smith obviously hit some threes too. But Corey Brewer hit a couple corner threes because the low man was pulled over because we were still running sort of DJ up, corralling at the point of attack, and the low man pulled all the way over. Now, I'm not saying Corey Brewer is a bad basketball player. He's my coach with the Pelicans, all right? I love Corey. I play with Corey.
You say he's what?
No, I'm not saying he's a coach with us. He's our PD guy, one of our PD guys.
Who is?
Brew. Corey Brewers.
Did not know that.
Yes, he is.
Know that.
He took he's doing the Evan Turner thing, just straight from the bubble right into coaching. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyways, if Corey Brewer doesn't hit those threes and we advance to the Western Conference Finals and play the Warriors, do we change our entire pick and roll coverage the next year? I don't know that we do. But now it's so in vogue, like it's the way everybody wants to play. And obviously Milwaukee, and I said this during the playoffs, Milwaukee, they're the number one defense in the league 2 years in a row. They play a certain way the whole season. But to win in the playoffs, you have to be able to adjust a little bit. And I'm not knocking Bud because I think Bud's one of the best coaches in the league. I'm not knocking anybody on their team. But there has to be some level of flexibility, series to series, matchup to matchup, where you can go to different coverages.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, and it's crazy, like when we played against Portland last year, and we had BK when I was in Oklahoma City. And I talked to Billy about it. We actually lost the game to Portland because we was in a drop coverage, right, with Dame. And Steph, Dame, all them like that shoot the lights out like off the dribble like that. They love to see the drop coverage because if they handle good enough, they're not worried about the guy who's guarding them. And Dame was like off. He was off most of the game. But I was still getting mad throughout the game. I was like, all right, now you just basically giving them a chance to line it up. What was in the game, that fourth quarter? He ran them off. Wham, wham. And then you're like, oh, we need to come up. But now, like I said, I'm not a coach, but I definitely think you got to be a little bit flexible with that stuff because sometimes those are like routine shots, right?
Practice shots. Walking into a practice shot.
The guy's sitting back there. And what's funny is because to me, I thought that the drop coverage was to give up like twos, right? Totally different if you're giving up threes.
To bring it all together, let's recap. The pick and roll offense and three-point shooting have become increasingly popular over the years. In response to this, drop coverage is a common defensive strategy used to counter the pick and roll. The drop coverage gives up mid-range jump shots. Once deemed less efficient, now practicing your mid-range jump shot presents a valuable opportunity against drop coverage. That's it for the video. Get buckets.